ISFJs, they have low extroversion, low openness to new experiences, very high agreeableness, and very high organization. ISFJs are typically known as housewives or ordinary people you may encounter on the street. They may be the supermarket cashier, store attendants, or anyone else that looks like an NPC. Which is also not a problem for the ISFJ. After all, people of this personality type much prefer to have peaceful and quiet lives. Now, the life plan of almost all ISFJs is probably to get married, to have children, to have a dog, to own a house, to get old and then die. Not because they really want or like these things, but probably because it is socially expected. And because of their poor openness to experience and sense of creativity, ISFJs prefer to follow what other people tell them to do instead of creating new tools for it. Now, some strengths of this type are their diligence and their discipline, and the fact that they are good listeners and lifelong friends. Once you have an ISFJ around, you will hardly lose sight of them. Along with this, ISFJs tend to take their relationships and commitments very seriously, but they tend to sacrifice a lot for other people, which can be either a good or a bad thing. Now, some weaknesses of the ISFJs is that due to their lack of creativity and thinking of new things, they may prefer to stay in the routine rather than risking doing something different. They have a resistance to any change, especially for things that they have already achieved, be it a relationship or a job. ISFJs can spend their entire lives doing the same thing, even if that thing does not bring them any benefits. Then, as a dominant function, introverted sensing or SI manifests as a powerful memory for what have worked well in the past, and the desire to structure life around traditions and the positive outcomes of things that have worked well in the past. Sometimes these are people who like to conform to hierarchies and respect things as they were, hoard the past, and constantly remind themselves of the experiences they had before. The dominant SI monologue is, I prefer to plan most of my life around the traditional and tried and true methods of doing things, as they have proven to be the most reliable ones. Then, as an auxiliary function extroverted feeling, or FE, it is the desire to apply one's understanding of a given situation in a way that satisfies the needs and desires of others. Since they prefer to give to others rather than receive, ISFJs can also have good social skills, although they are not overly vocal about doing so. FE's auxiliary's monologue would be, how can I satisfy other people's needs and desires, understand and apply knowledge to achieve interpersonal peace? Then, as an auxiliary function, introverted thinking, or TI, it is the organization of pre-existing knowledge in a logical and systematic way. Sometimes ISFJs can also use this to justify any problems in their lives and their low reluctance to try new things out, preferring to invent more excuses than to invent solutions for the problems they may have. The tertiary TI monologue would be, where does this new hunch of information I've acquired fit into what I already know to be true? Then the ISFJ's shadow or inferior function, which would be an E or extrovert intuition, tends to be expressed as a reluctance to try new ways of doing things, occasionally giving way to anxiety about the unknown. As an E matures, its user will become more comfortable living in uncertainty and entering new possibilities. The inferior NE monologue before maturation is, it's best to stick to the most reliable methods of doing things. There is no point in getting lost in a sea of unpredictable possibilities. Now, to overcome this, ISFJs should appreciate the value of socializing so that they can open themselves up. Instead of focusing on interacting with the same old people, ISFJs should use their social skills to compensate for this lack of expansion with the new things they lack. That is, going to church, going to parties, talking to new people, is how this type can expand themselves more. And to do this, they could spend more time with other extroverted types like the ESTPs, ESFPs, and even ESFJs. Compared to other types, the ISTJs are much more pragmatic and methodical than the ISFJs are, focusing more on the work, the results, and the process rather than the social motivations for doing what they do. ESFJs tend to be much more gossipy, fake, and loud. The INFJs tend to be much more weird, quirky, and idealistic than the ISFJs. ISFPs tend to be much more moralistic activists and dye their hair much more than the ISFJs do. Now, the best representation of this type is certainly the narrator of Fight Club, a normal man with a normal job, with normal desires and no perspective or connection to greater meaning in things he does in his life. Another film called Perfect Days also portrays the experience of what it's like to be an ISFJ pretty well. But if you are a woman, Hinata Hyuga from Naruto, Pam Beasley from The Office, or even Cinderella before she became a princess are great representations of this type as well. If you're an ISFJ, well, just keep doing what you do. You are the best.